Welcome, and thank you for inviting me to speak with you today and for choosing to come to this webinar rather than be outside on this glorious May Day. So this is the CBC Wellness Campaign, the Science of Wellness series, and this is the second of 4 webinars running every couple of weeks. So this webinar is about kicking the inner critic to the curb. And it's going to be 30 minutes long. And after that, we're going to have 15 minutes for Q&A. And if there's one guideline, one bit of guidance that I can offer you for today, it's that don't feel like you need to do anything that I'm suggesting. Think of what I'm offering as an offering, as a guideline. Always know that you're at choice and that you either follow or don't follow what I'm suggesting at any point. So please know that you're always free to do what you feel is best for you. So my name's David Brown. I'm going to be running the session today. I'm a professional life coach and also a leadership coach, as well as a trainer and facilitator. I run webinars and workshops on stress management, resilience, self-confidence and well-being. And I'm also a Samaritan's volunteer. So today we're going to be looking at the inner critic, what the inner critic is, what purpose it serves, and as the title of the webinar suggests, how to kick your inner critic to the curb. And so that I can get a sense of who's in the room, I'd just like you to take a moment to pause, to relax in your chair, maybe put down your sandwich, put down your cutlery, and take a moment to maybe even close your eyes and to take your attention inward. And just to get a sense of what your energy levels are right now on a scale of 1 to 10. So 1 is really low energy, 10 is really high energy. And to take a moment to think about what your mood is. Do you have a high mood, a middle mood, or a low mood? And I invite you, if you will, if you feel happy to, is just to put in the chat what your numbers are, 1 to 10, and high, middle and low mood, just so that I've got a sense of where people are at on the call today. If some people could offer that, that would be great. That's great. And so while people are doing that, just to say that if anyone is sort of down in the low numbers, so sort of 3 or 4, or the mood is a bit low, then, you know, to exercise some self-care today. Don't push yourself particularly on what we're going to cover today. And if your numbers are high, then maybe to challenge yourself a little bit, you know, have some fun with it and try and get a little bit more out of this than you might do otherwise. But just be aware of how resilient you're feeling today. Okay, but it looks like we've got some quite a broad mixture, which is what I would expect. Okay, so self-care should be the priority at all points for everybody. Great. Yeah, hi Chaz. So let us begin in earnest. What is your inner critic? So your inner critic, or other words might be your saboteur, or the gremlin, or the troll, is that inner voice that tells you, for example, I'm not good enough. So you might hear yourself saying, I'm not worthy to get that promotion, or to go for that new job, or to ask for a pay rise. Or your inner critic might say, who am I to say that and to do that? So you might find that pops up when you feel like speaking out in a meeting or take on new responsibility. Oh, who am I to do that? Mustn't do that. Or you might find your inner critic saying, you can't ask for that. Yeah, so asking for help or support, or asking or volunteering to take on a new role. Or you might even find that your inner critic is saying, I should be better at this, like, so maybe better at coping with COVID, or I should be further on in my career, or faster to learn things or to adapt to things faster. or maybe smarter, that I should be more intelligent, or I should be more capable, or maybe even stronger, maybe physically stronger or emotionally stronger. So these are the kind of things, the generic things that we find our inner critic might be saying, just as a pointer for you. But what I'd like to do first is give you an example of what the sorts of things that my inner critic says. So when I used to go to social events, I'd really worry about what I was going to say and wonder whether people would like me. Am I intelligent enough? Am I funny enough? Do I earn enough money? Do I have an impressive enough career? And I'd feel real anxiety before and during the event, and then kind of feel an overwhelming relief afterwards. Like very often I'd have to have a bit of a sleep because I'd feel it so draining. My tummy would get tight. I'd notice my breathing would get quite restricted. I'd feel tension in my neck and in my shoulders. And I'd kind of brace myself, you know, for the challenges, like if people would challenge me on something or would argue with me. No way that I could relax. And I certainly didn't enjoy any of those sorts of events. I used to really hate it. And this was the way that my inner critic used to manifest itself and would undermine my confidence. It would encourage me to stay quiet. It would say to me, you know, I don't want to be seen, to avoid embarrassment or humiliation. And through the process that I'm going to take you through today, I've got a lot better at being more confident in social situations. And I'll give you another example, slightly different, in that I used to receive feedback really badly. I could, when I'd kind of get some feedback from people, I could feel my shoulders and spine open up, and I'd kind of find myself bristling as if I was going to get really argumentative with them, or maybe even be arrogant with them. There's no way that I'd be listening when I was in that kind of frame of mind. My breathing would become heavier and louder, as if I was going to maybe shout the person down and really argue with them. I was definitely not open to feedback. And there was no way that I was going to learn anything when I was in that kind of situation. So in that scenario, for example, my inner critic was stopping me from taking on possibly valuable criticism, so that there was no way that I'd be able to grow. I wanted to avoid feeling stupid, avoid that feeling of not feeling good enough. And again, this process has helped me to feel less defensive and more open. And I've learned a lot as a result. So there are a couple of examples of how this inner critic work can be really helpful, and how the inner critic can hold us back a little bit. But now that I've shared a couple of my examples, I'd like to give you the opportunity to give a few moments to think of your own examples. Yeah. So this is a private exploration. I'm not going to ask you to share this in the chat, but definitely to take some time to think about, okay, what sort of situations do I find myself where that inner critic starts to speak up? You know, what situations at work, maybe in my personal relationships, maybe with my children, with my partner, with friends. Just to think of a few situations that are relevant and pertinent to you. And now that hopefully you've got some, maybe just think of one. Think of that inner voice now, and think of a time, a situation where your inner critic starts to say its magic words. And more importantly, when your inner critic speaks and you listen. And as you hear those voices in your head, I want you to allow yourself to take the shape, allow your body to take the shape that your body takes when your inner critic starts to speak. Maybe your shoulders start to slump, or maybe you feel your shoulders bristle. Maybe your spine becomes really extended, or maybe it slouches. Maybe you're breathing, you hold your breath, or maybe your breathing becomes quite loud, or it could become shallow. How does your tummy feel? Do you feel tension in your tummy? What about your face? Does your face feel tight? Does your face feel flushed? Do you feel tension in your forehead, or do you feel your eyes kind of starting to close up? And generally in your body, do you feel expanded? Like you're trying to make yourself really big? Or do you feel contracted, like you're trying to make yourself really small? And do you feel kind of floppy, would be the word that I would use, you know? Do you feel this sense of collapse, like you don't want to resist? Or do you feel a sense of tension and armoring, like you're trying to be challenging? And there's no right or wrong here. This is just an exercise in awareness. This is an exercise in trying to raise your awareness of what happens to you when you listen to your inner critic. Now, I know this may be uncomfortable and it may even be unpleasant for some of you, but if you're willing to, please stick with it and start to notice, what is it that your inner critic is actually saying? Some of the lines that your inner critic is saying to you in that kind of situation. And if you're willing to, I'd ask you to put that in the chat. And the reason that I'm asking you to put it in the chat is simply because often sharing these things can help to normalize what people's inner critics say. So I've already shared, but if people are willing to share themselves, you know, what if I fail? You are not a good person. You're not interesting. Yeah. Really, really common. Thank you for those of you that have said that. I'm not living up to my job expectations. Have you made the right decision? What do you know? You are always so negative. I should be. Oh yeah, the shoulds, the shoulds, the shoulds. Yeah. Other people are better at this than me. Not good enough, not intelligent enough. You're boring. Why do you say that? I'll say the wrong thing. Yeah. Why haven't you? Whatever. Yeah, great. It's all up to me. I'm not good enough. Yeah. At 40, you should know what you're doing. Yeah. I've just hit 50. Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. Exactly. Great. Thank you, everybody, for being so open about what your inner critic is saying. Yeah. People don't like me. Yeah. Great. So isn't that icky? Isn't that horrible? Ugh. Okay, so let's just take a minute or a moment to get rid of all of that feeling, right? So if you want to stand up, if you're willing to stand up, if you want to do this seated, that's absolutely fine. But let's just sort of tap it out. Let's rub it out, okay? So take your left hand on your right arm and just give your arm a bit of a rub or a bit of a tap. Right hand on your left arm and give that a little bit of a rub and a bit of a tap onto your shoulders, around your neck, chest, tummy, onto your back. Just give yourself a little bit of a rub. Okay, shaking your arms, shaking your face, making a weird sound. Shake it off, shake your legs like you're trying to get water off your arms and legs. Maybe jump up and down if you're willing to. Oh. And then come back to the screen. And hopefully you're feeling a little less icky than you did before. Welcome back, everybody. Great. So the point of that first part, as I said, is to raise your awareness of when your inner critic is in the driving seat. You want to know when your inner critic has taken control so that you can do something about it. But why does your inner critic take control? Put simply, it's trying to help. I want you to know that your inner critic is acting as your friend. It has been created by you to protect you, to keep you inside your comfort zone, to stop you being burned again like you have on previous occasions when you have that experience of things being unpleasant for you. But as well as keeping you safe, and I do put that in inverted commas because your inner critic keeps you safe, but at the same time, it also holds you back. So your inner critic stops you from growing. It stops you from expanding your experience, from learning, from thriving, from enriching your life. It stops you from taking risks, from doing things differently, from living. It stops you from living in joy and in fulfillment. So there's a real risk to be taken if we listen to our inner critic all the time, if it stops us from living the life that we want for ourselves. So I am a life coach, and I want something different for you. I imagine that you might want something different for yourself as well. So we all have within us the ability to counter this inner critic voice, but it's always a choice. And now what I'm going to do is tell you an old story attributed to the Cherokee Indians called the story of the two wolves. An old Cherokee chief is telling his grandson, who will be chief himself one day, a story. A fight is going on inside me, he said. It is a terrible fight between two wolves. One is evil. He is jealousy, envy, greed, arrogance, resentment, lies, and fear. He continued. The other is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The wolves are fighting to the death. Wide-eyed, the boy asked his grandfather which wolf will win. And the old Cherokee simply replies, the one you feed. The evil wolf is like the inner critic. It uses its skills of fear to keep you small and limited. The good wolf is that part of yourself that wants something different, to grow, to expand, to risk and thrive, to feel enriched and live in fulfillment. So to kick your inner critic to the curb, you want to focus on the good wolf. Simple as that. But rather than call it the good wolf, I'm going to call it the inner leader or your inner leader. And we're going to focus on your inner leader right now. So what I invite you to do is to think about someone that you admire. Maybe a mentor, a friend, teacher, leader, a role model. Maybe it's an athlete, someone in the sporting world, or an actor, or a character in a book or a movie or something that you've seen on TV. And think of a situation where this person is particularly inspirational to you. Maybe they're super confident, maybe they're really assured, maybe they're inspiring, maybe when they share wisdom. And allow your body to take the shape of how they are. We have these mirror neurons in our brains that allow us to mirror people, the people that we focus on. So maybe you've got this feeling, allow your body to expand into feeling more confident, more assured. Maybe you feel like you want to take up space, maybe they stand with their hands on their hips or something. Maybe there's a sense of wisdom, compassion, or inner strength. And I invite you to stand if you want to, maybe standing or even moving around. So you might find that you stand And you can stand in a way like hands on hips, feet wide apart, or maybe even to walk around your space, so that there's that sense of walking with this sense of inner confidence, this sense of inner leadership. Do whatever it is that works best for you. So in sitting, standing, or moving as this other person, you are accessing those aspects of yourself that connects you to them. You're feeding the inner leader, and you feel different as a result. So allow yourself to savor that feeling. Maybe you feel your chest open, your heart open. Maybe you feel like you have more clarity. It'll be different for everyone. And then from here, think of a situation where your inner critic starts to speak up. So I want you to focus on your inner leader, but just think of a situation where your inner critic usually steps in. So this inner leader version of yourself knows your inner critic is trying to help, but you're going to simply say to your inner critic, thank you for sharing, but. Thank you for sharing, but. Say it out loud if you can. Say it in your head if you prefer. But for example, thank you for sharing, but I choose to speak up in this meeting because this issue is important to me around justice and doing the right thing. Or thank you for sharing, but I'm finding my way through COVID in my own way and in my own time. Just find the thing that works for you. Thank you for sharing, but I've decided that I no longer agree to be treated this way in this relationship. Say it out loud, whatever feels true and right for you from that place of the inner leader. Saying it out loud is best. So how was that for you? Again, please write in the chat if you're willing what that experience was like to embody that inner leader and to have your inner leader speak to your inner critic and just say, thank you for sharing, but actually I don't need you here. I'm choosing something different. Feels empowering. Great. It's calming. Fantastic. So when you hear the inner critic's voice, you don't need to be mad or frustrated or angry. Yeah, taking back control, positive and enabling, reassuring, a bit new and strange. Yeah. So the inner critic is just a habit. That's all the inner critic is. We get used to doing it. Yeah. Quite emotional. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So again, just be gentle with yourself if you're finding it emotional. Okay. This can be quite new territory if you've been in the grip of your inner critic. I've spent years in the grip of my inner critic. Really found it challenging. But through this work over time, I've managed to overcome that. So know that your inner critic is trying to help, and it's only trying to help you as best it can. But you're thanking your inner critic and letting it know that you've decided to respond to this situation differently, in a way that is more aligned to your confidence and your well-being and your fulfillment. So you're making a choice. You don't need to listen to your inner critic. You can choose the inner leader. So you already have access to the good wolf or the inner leader. By taking a little time to embody that inner leader, you are feeding it, making it stronger, and giving it focus and energy. which weakens that evil wolf or the inner critic, allowing you to kick the inner critic to the curb. So as we wrap this up, what are you taking away from today's webinar? What are you learning and taking with you from this 30 minutes that we've had together? Good. Don't be so hard on myself. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you just took that, that would make it all worthwhile. Be brave. Yeah. Yeah. Positive ideas, a reminder that no one is perfect and we all do our best. Absolutely. Yeah. Something to try when my inner critic gets chatty at night. Yeah. Yeah. Learning that I can do things. Oh, it's all getting very quick. Positivity, feed the other wolf. Yes, learning that my inner critic is trying to help. Yeah, it's just for me, it's a more compassionate way of dealing with it. What I used to do is give my inner critic or give myself a really hard time for, I don't know, not speaking up or being nervous or whatever. Yeah. Whereas actually it's just trying to help. I feel 8 or 9 more positive and take opportunities. Great. Yeah, lovely. Step back from negative situations and think about this session. Fantastic. Lovely. Good. So what commitment are you making to yourself as a result of today? Yeah, adopting the posture. Yeah, so what are you committing to now as an action to do something differently? Just with a minute to go. Good, just to think about that. Yeah, embody my inner leader, using thank you for sharing, but at least once a day. Yeah, fantastic. Great. So thank you everybody for sharing in the chat. That's been great. So you may have gotten what you need from this session, and if so, then I'm really, really pleased about that. But you might find that within the session or later on, that you might have some more questions, they might bubble up, or you might have had some insights, some aha moments. For those of you that would like to talk to me about that, I'm more than happy to have a conversation. So I've just put my email address into the chat. All you need to do is email me yes, and I'll come back to you and we'll try and arrange a time to speak. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you found it useful. I hope you've learned some things about how to kick your inner critic to the curb, and that you use your inner leader, that side of yourself, to help create the life that you really want for yourself. So that's kind of really my overall hope for everybody today. So I'm a minute over, but for those of you that would like to stay or able to stay for the Q&A, either we can have the questions in the chat, or we have a Q&A box that people can put their questions into if they would like. So I think we'll do it that way if we can. Yeah. People are saying thank you. So you are more than welcome. Great. Really helpful. Very good. Pleased to hear it. So yeah, either questions in the chat or in the Q&A, or if you'd prefer to, then email them to me. Thank you. This allows time out to think and reflect. Many thanks and best wishes. Need to go. Great. Lovely. Okay, so I'll just give it a little bit longer. Right, we got one question here. Any other advice on how to stop us from putting ourselves down? Yeah, and again, great question. So to put yourself down is simply a habit. It's a habit that we learn, and it's not necessarily even that important where it comes from. But what's important is that we notice the habit. I have a habit of putting myself down, giving myself a hard time, wherever it is. And it is that inner critic that is using that as a way to keep you inside your comfort zone, to keep you small, to keep you what feels like safe. But safe is really just another way of saying, I'm sticking to what I'm used to. I'm sticking to what I feel most comfortable with. But sometimes something like a gratitude practice can be really, really powerful. So becoming more familiar and spending time with this idea of what I feel grateful for. And that might even include what you feel grateful for about yourself. Often a gratitude practice can start with, I'm grateful for my dog or my children or my partner or my job or whatever. But what I've noticed, not just with myself, but with other people, is we begin to start to notice, what do I feel grateful for about myself? Or even to just to specifically focus on, what do I feel grateful for about myself? And that might just be something very, very small. Okay, like I made a nice breakfast for myself, or that I did a kind thing to somebody today. But over time, with practice, that can build into something much bigger. So a gratitude practice can be really helpful. And then also spending time focusing on the inner leader. So often there can be work around values, around what. So values are another way of saying, what's really important to me. So focusing on your values means that you begin to change the way you think and change the way you behave about your life in general. So there's a couple of things that you can use to put yourself down less and focus on the positives instead. Hope that was helpful. How long did it take me to master the skill, or have you? Does your inner critic? Oh yeah. So great question. My inner critic is still often on the rampage, and it really is a question of, it used to just completely dominate my thinking. And through this exercise and things like gratitude practice and focusing on values and things like life purpose and things like that, slowly but surely, more and more, I feel my inner leader in the driving seat of my life and my inner critic less and less. What I would say, though, is that as my inner leader is in the driving seat more and more and more, there are still some situations when my inner critic just takes over. So situations that I find maybe particularly stressful, or situations where I get particularly anxious, where I find it incredibly difficult to get my inner leader into the driving seat. So for example, I said something that to somebody a few days ago, and I noticed that I began to think about what I'd said and the impact that that had on them, And I let that run. And before I knew it, I started to tell myself that I was a really bad person, that this person was going to be in real trouble because of the things that I'd said. I hadn't said anything particularly bad, but it was just this thing of my inner critic gets hold of it. And before I know it, I've created that I'm this really, really bad person. And I've created that the impact of my words and my actions has meant that this person is going to have a really, really hard time, and that it's going to be really detrimental to them. That's not true, but I make it true. I believe it in myself. And so I have to work hard then at being able to take the steam out of my inner critic and bring my attention back to my inner leader, where I can say to myself, I'm a good person. I know that I'm a good person. I know that I was doing what I thought was best in that particular situation. And very, very slowly, the momentum, the impact of that inner critic starts to diminish. And then my inner leader starts to come back in again. So very much situation specific. But again, I hope that sort of gives a sense of reality, if you like, that this isn't your inner critic was in the driving seat, and then suddenly one day your inner critic's never in the driving seat. I would say, if someone's being honest with you, I don't care how confident they are. I don't care whether it's, I don't know, Richard Branson or anybody. There's always going to be something that makes them, where they've got that voice in their head that go, oh, not so sure. Maybe you're not as good as you think you are. Everybody has it, and if they're honest, they'd admit to it. But not everyone's honest about these things. My main thing is singing, which I like but can't, and the critic doesn't help but is true. What do I do? Okay, so if you like singing, then maybe it's about giving yourself permission to sing, but to sing because you enjoy it, not to sing because you're any good, or that you have praise, or that you're going to be recognized for your talent. So one of the stories that I tell is of a creativity course. I went on a creativity weekend course, and the kind of the homework from this thing was to write for 15 or 20 minutes every day, and not to read what I'd written, but just to write whatever it was that came to my head. And at the end of that writing, just to burn it. So it almost became like a ritual of doing the writing process, enjoying the writing process, and then burning it. And then a year later, I contacted the person that had run this thing. I said, well, I've done this for a year. That's what this guy said to me to do. What do I do now? And he goes, great. Well, you've done that for a year. Keep writing, but you don't need to burn it. If you want to read it, then read it. If you want to publish it, then publish it. But that's not the point for writing. The point for writing is to write. The point of painting, or to draw, or to do poetry, or any of these creative pursuits, is to do the thing itself, not to be praised for it, not to be published for it, not to make money from it, none of those things. So what I would say around singing is the same thing, is that part of the inner critic's thing is that you're not good at it, or that you're never going to make any money from it, or that people will criticize you for it, or whatever. But the bottom line is you enjoy it. So do the things that you enjoy. Allow yourself to enjoy the sensation of things that bring you joy. Yeah. And if singing is one of those things for you, then sing. I hope that helps. Okay, I rely on others to counter my inner critic sometimes. Any ideas on making sure I use my inner leader? Well, it's about practice. It's about practicing that thing that we've done on this webinar. And though it's a very human thing, a very human trait to look to others to give us confirmation or affirmation or support, and that is very normal. The problem that we find ourselves in is that if we rely on other people, then we're not self-reliant. And that doesn't mean that you have to be self-reliant all the time, because we all get to some points in our life where actually we can't do it ourselves, and we do need the support of others. But the more we can learn to be self-reliant, the better. So that we know that we can call on ourselves and we can rely on ourselves to be our own advocate, if you like. But that inner critic is a thing that we need to practice to get out of. And that inner leader is a classic example. And I've already used a few examples, like the gratitude practice, like the values, like the purpose practice, as ways of, excuse me, as ways of trying to get that inner leader to the fore more and more and more, where we feel alive, where we feel fulfilled, and where we feel that we're living our lives in a meaningful and purposeful way. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, everybody, for asking your questions and contributing so beautifully in the chat. And hopefully looking forward to seeing you on the next one, which is in 2 weeks' time. And we're going to be looking at communication and relationships. So thank you all, and see you on the next one.